Good evening and welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators Football Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Ben, joined as always by your other host, Mr. Randy. Randy, how we doing tonight? How we feeling? Ready for this little different pod we're doing tonight? I'm excited about it. If you can't tell, how you feeling?
Hey man, really excited. Good to be with you again for another episode. Looking forward to the deep dive on this one. And outside of that, it's a great day in Gaines, Vegas. A little bit on the hotter side, but it was good.
Nice, nice. I like it. All right. So, what will we be talking about tonight? We referenced this a couple of weeks ago, but the topic for this evening is can or will the Gators return to SEC dominance in 2025? So I've got to tell you, first of all, I'm excited that we can even have this conversation, that it's even a possibility to have this conversation, because it's been a minute since we could even discuss this, quite frankly. But really looking forward to getting into this and doing it with you. So as always, we'll start off with our intro, go through our mission, our accuracy disclaimer, our vision, and our agenda, which I think I forgot to read last week, which is weird, but I'm pretty sure I did, but at least forgot part of it. But at any rate, our mission is always to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football. Our accuracy disclaimer is that our information will be accurate to the best of our possible ability. We will cite our sources whenever we use them, and all statistical data comes from either ESPN or stats.ncaa.org and recruiting data from on3.com. Our vision is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will be based on review of film, and while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions, as well as on the field execution. Okay, so agenda for this evening is going to be, what is dominance? What does it look like? Let's define it, right? Let's actually look at what do we mean when we say that, and what is that going to mean moving forward? Then from there, we're going to ask the question, can the Gators dominate this fall? Is it even possible? I think I've kind of already alluded to the fact that we think it is possible, but we'll get to that more later. And then we will talk about, will they dominate this fall? And what does it mean if we could do that? So what is it? What does that look like? What does it mean? Is it possible? Will it happen? And what does it look like if we do? Those are the topics for the evening. So, and then from there, of course, we'll wrap things up and talk about our next episode. But with that being said, let's get right into this and let's start talking about what is dominance. So start us off. Give me your definition of what we're defining dominance as. And we didn't just pull this arbitrarily. We did some research here, so I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, we've got a couple things coming down the pipeline when it comes to dominance. And first of all, I will echo your sentiments on talking about the Gators, the Florida Gators return to dominance in the SEC in the football ranks. That's got kind of a good ring to it, you know. We haven't been there in a while, and if we can pull this off, it will be a fantastic opportunity to capitalize on the rise of those Gator boys staying hot on the basketball
Yes,
court. So
indeed.
that is
Yes,
what it is,
indeed.
right?
Stay hot.
Bingo. So a couple things that we looked at, and B, I'm going to do a little deeper dive here real quick in the sense of what does dominance look like, right? So I look at dominance as a couple things: consistently winning games, competing for championships, attracting top tier recruits. So those are important.
Yep.
Consistently winning, which we did that in the latter half of the season to close out the season. A lot of people said that would produce a lot of momentum. We'll see. Strong recruiting. We think that Billy's done a good job on the recruiting board. Now, we don't have a top 3 class, a top 5 class. We round out in the top 10. I believe that's where we ended up.
Yep.
Either way, we would probably agree that this team on paper is some of the best that we've had in recent memory.
In a long time. Absolutely.
Right? Okay. Bowl game eligibility and potential. Here's the other thing. When you have a dominant program, it's not a question of, are we going to a bowl game? Are we going to squeak out 6 or 7? No, we're going to a bowl game, and it's going to be a highly televised bowl game. It's going to be one with some significance, especially when it boils down to the CFP. And then the last thing, when I look at dominance, which I think is already there, and B, for the record, I think you do too, is positive culture within the program.
Absolutely.
Okay? So to that end, when we looked at the top 4 teams in the SEC last year, their overall record 6-2.
Yep, that's
in the SEC.
Top 4 or better, right? So that was the 4th team was 6-2. Well, actually, no. I guess that was the average, right? Because technically, four tied for.
The
There
average,
was a
right?
5 and 3 that tied for fourth, but it was like a six-way tie for fourth. So we're not counting that.
Right. So then, furthermore, you go to, okay, what do we look like from scoring the football? What does that look like? Top 40 team scoring offense, 33 and a half points a game, and top 30 in scoring defense, 16 and a half points per game.
And
Okay.
let me interject there. So the thing I want to say about that is we didn't just come up with these things arbitrarily, right? We looked at those top four teams and we said, okay, what are the top four or top five or whatever, teams doing in terms of their points per game and their points per game allowed, right? Now, obviously, there's other metrics, there's other things that come into play. We're not saying this is some kind of guarantee that if we do these things, we're definitely going to have that. But ultimately, when you look at it, I think it's much more likely when we see it if you can be top 40 in scoring offense, top 30 in scoring defense, which granted, that's lofty. We haven't hit either one of those numbers in quite some time, right?
Oh, sure.
Now our scoring defense was better last year by the time the season ended, but it still wasn't top 30. So what we're really looking at is what can we see? What does that mean? And why does it matter? Well, that's because all of the teams that were top four or even top five in the SEC fell into those categories. So I think it's a relevant stat to look at in that regard. So continue.
Exactly. Right. Great points there. And here's the other thing too. We feel fundamentally we've got to hit one of those, right? Either the top 40 in scoring offense or top 30 in scoring defense. Not necessarily both, but definitely one, because here's the thing, especially when we look at the SEC schedule, right? That's going to play a factor in things. We looked at another metric as in margin of victory. However, we felt like margin of victory is not really going to be a true factor in lieu of the schedule, right? So,
right.
Unranked teams, Kentucky, Mississippi State, we anticipate a larger margin of victory there.
Yep.
Right? There towards the bottom of the SEC. That is going to be what it is. But, when you look at the SEC as a whole and you look at the quality teams that have made the top 25 that put out a very good quality product, it's not going to be like in the 90s when we used to run at the score against Kentucky 56-3.
Right.
In the fun and gun. It's just not going to be. So
especially not with NIL and the amount of talent distribution you have and everything else.
Perfect point. Talent distribution. Pandora's box was opened up a few years ago, and you are seeing the ramifications of that with all this talent moving, shifting, turning, and again, for what it's worth, NIL, whatever, pay for play, pay for performance, whatever you want to call it, it has definitely changed the playing field, no pun intended there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Are you wrapping up there, or am I, or no?
You tell me. I don't really have a whole lot of points other than
that's fine.
The consistent winning, the strong recruiting, the bowl game eligibility, and the culture. I think we have some of those things already in there, but now we really dial down, we really fine tune it when it comes to scoring offense, scoring defense. That's really what's going to solidify us at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think all those points are excellent. Obviously, we came to some of this data together, right, to kind of go in and look at this. So I don't have any different points to make than the ones you made in terms of defining dominance here. I think I just want to restate a couple of different things, maybe with a little different light on them, right? So already talked about the significance of the top 40 and the top 30. You mentioned having to hit one, not necessarily having to hit both. Now, for the record, we're not saying you can miss the other one by 30 spots, right? You've got to be close. Right, like you maybe within 10 at most, right, of one of those other spots, absolute max, right? Now, again, some of these things are affected by the scheduling. We're going to talk about the scheduling a lot here, but not in the same way we did last year, right? Last year, the schedule was this overwhelmingly dominant, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to, get through this gauntlet that we have to run? We talked about it all season. We talked about how culture was going to have to play a factor. It did. Right. We talked about how players were going to have to step up and make plays. They did, at least to an extent, right? In a lot of cases anyway. But I think what it comes back to is a kind of a couple of things that we have to look into here, right? You look at all of those things. You look at the things that this team does have, right? This excellent culture. absolutely on paper being very, very talented, right? But then there's some other question marks, obviously, when it comes to, okay, well, how's that talent going to look on the field? How's it going to be used? How is it going to be maximized? And those are questions that I think I probably know the answer to. However, I'm going to say that we've never had a roster this talented before. We did make some changes in the offseason from a coaching standpoint. Do we do a better job of maximizing talent this fall? I'll say maybe there's a chance. I'm not going to say it will
Oh,
happen. I'm not going to say definitively, but maybe there's a chance. A lot of rumors, right, around Callaway getting more involved, him talking about running something other than 12 or 13 or 12 or 11 personnel, as we've already discussed. All of these things that are kind of coming into play makes me think that it's at least possible that we do a better job of maximizing the talent we have on the field from a scheme and coaching standpoint. Now, does that mean it's going to happen? No, definitely not. I'm not saying with any kind of certainty whatsoever. In fact, it's more like a glimmer of hope, but I'll take a glimmer over, where I was. Um, and that is something for sure. So I think to your point, what is dominance, right? Just going back to the overall theme here. You have to be top four at a minimum, preferably top three or top two, right? Because then top two puts you in the title game. But it is a little different without having divisions anymore. That's why we gave it top four, right? Is because
yeah.
of that. So I think you're looking at probably a 6-2 record. Yes, theoretically 5-3 did get fourth this year, but again, it was like a 4 or 5 way tie break. So like, we're not going to we shouldn't have to rely on luck to make fourth if we're dominant, right? If we're dominant, you make fourth, right? So,
Right.
or better, really, right? And again, it is the toughest conference once again for the like 20th year in a row or something like that, or every year since 2005 or something in that neighborhood. The SEC drafted more players into the NFL than any other league every single year. It happens like clockwork. Just saw the stat the other day. So obviously there's a lot of talent in our league. It's not easy to be dominant in our league. And again, that talent is more well divided now than it has been in previous seasons because of NIL, right? So these are things that you do have to keep in mind and talk about. One more point as it relates to what you were talking about with Kentucky and Mississippi State. Those should be the easier wins for sure. And they should have a larger margin of victory. But I want you to keep in mind, and I'm not saying this like we said it last year about the schedule being a juggernaut, but the thing I want to throw in there is it's highly possible that every other SEC team we play, all 6 of them, are ranked when we play them, or will have been ranked at some point, almost certainly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost certainly, but likely could be ranked. The only one Randy and I are a little questionable on is Ole Miss. We're not sure how they're going to bounce back from kind of having their hearts broken last year and throwing all that money at the problem, right? I don't know how that looks for them. Could be fine. Lane Kiffin's not a bad coach, certainly, and we have to go to Ole Miss next year, right? We have to go to the Grove, so that's no easy task, right? So we have to make sure that that game doesn't get away from us, obviously. But again, I think it's likely most, if not all, of the rest of our opponents besides Kentucky and Mississippi State are ranked when we play them, and hopefully we are ranked as well. That would be the hope, right? So, all right. To that end, I think that does a pretty good job of defining what we're trying to get to, what we think dominance looks like, what's realistic, in terms of that, and where we go from there. So, with that, let's ask the question: can the Gators dominate this fall? So we brought up some other stats here, and we wanted to bring them out, and I'm going to start with those. So the last 3 conference games where DJ was a starter and finished the game, right? So we're not counting Georgia, we're not counting Texas, not because those were the best opponents. He just wasn't there for either all or some of the game, right? And we all know how we feel about those games. So let's look at what this looked like. Offense in those games: 48, 27, 24. That's 48 against Kentucky, 27 LSU, 24 Ole Miss, an average of 33 points per game. Now, if you recall back to what we talked about as being needed, we said 33.5 was kind of the barometer for that. Interesting. Last 3 conference games of scoring defense. Again, with Lagway as a full-time starter. Kentucky 20, LSU 16, Ole Miss 17. That is 17.6 points per game. Now, I know it may seem like when we're talking about this that we cherry-pick these stats. We didn't. We just said, okay, let's look at the last 3 games where Lagway actually started and played, right? That's it. Because really, other than Samford, these are the only games that he started and played the full game of, right? So these are the only 3 in the season other than Samford, which we're obviously not counting Samford, right? So I think it's really important that we look at this, because these are the indications of what we can expect next season, or at least hope to expect next season, I guess I should say. It's not a guarantee, certainly, far from a guarantee. But if you average that out, as I mentioned on defense, it's 17.6 per game. As we said, 16.5 was the average of those teams inside the top 30, right? So right around that number as well. Pretty remarkable stuff, honestly, when we look at it on paper and see, okay, if we play like we played in those conference wins or conference games where DJ started, which were wins, right? Again, started and finished, not counting Georgia. We averaged the points we need on offense. We held the teams to the points we needed to on defense. Kind of interesting. So, having said that, my take certainly, as far as can we dominate this fall? Yeah, we can. Now, that's not the same as will, but we have the capability, and the proof's right in front of you. Ironclad. It's right there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great points, B. Speaking of DJ Lagway, did someone start throwing?
Oh, yeah, that clip might have gone viral a little bit.
Might have, huh?
So for those that don't know, fill them in.
Yeah. So Coach Napier, after the orange and blue game, said, yeah, DJ should be good to go by June. Should be up and throwing, should be 100%. And we just saw a clip earlier today about DJ Lagway throwing a ball. It's like, wait a minute. Did I have to do a double take? What just happened? I don't know. B, what were you? I mean, I know what I was feeling. What were your initial reactions to it?
I think I can sum it up pretty well with, whew.
Fair
Just
enough.
a giant sigh of relief, right? But no,
Yeah.
I would also say excitement.
Yes.
Looked good throwing the ball. His dad was quoted as saying that they're working him up, right? They got him on a pitch count right now. They're working him up, throwing the ball. I think somewhere between like 40 and 60 balls a day. Nothing crazy right now. Again, that's why he's going to be back to 100% by June. That's still the projected timeline, right? For
Yes.
OTAs, right? That's the thought process. But he is starting to throw again as promised, if you will. And man, it's not a bad thing to see, that's for sure. And man, he looks good throwing the football. God, his mechanics are pretty.
Again, I think the word that you used to describe some of those deep ball passes last year was effortless and magical. I think
Yep.
those are the two best terms I used to identify them. But anyways, back to topic.
I mean, that's on topic for the record, because without Lagway, this is all down the tubes. So,
oh yeah, isn't that the truth? Oh, June can't come soon enough, especially when you look at what he's fully capable of. Because again, if the shoulder's healed, the lower body injury, whatever it is healed, and he is 100%, then some amazing things happen this fall. And we have every reason to believe that they will happen, right? But to your point, had a lot of great points there. The interesting thing about this is all of the data focuses on what we can do well, the different opportunities that we have within this team, what this team is really, really capable of outside of the improved play. B, you made a mention of it earlier with the coaching additions, especially on defense, right? Defense, obviously we were hoping for a little bit more change on offense, but hey, Callaway gets promoted and we have Steve Spurrier Jr. as an offensive analyst. Okay, well,
yep.
It's a start. I
will take that over Dan Enos any day, sir.
Oh, folks, that is not a parting shot on Dan Enos. Good guy, great guy. Nothing against that, but yeah, Steve Spurrier Jr. You gotta give those flowers there. So improved play, strong leadership, deep bench. You look at the rotations, right? You look at the skill positions at running back, at wide receiver. They're laden. They're laden with talent. Okay.
Yep.
Can we stay healthy? B, to that end, we had what? 5-6 starters that were out for the spring game. Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Chemistry, we know, is there. The culture is there. The Gators can absolutely dominate this fall. But again, I kind of am on your bandwagon or on your train as far as, even though we can, it does not necessarily mean that we will. And
good segue.
Yeah, and a lot of things come into play, right? A lot of things come into play, such as the injury bug, such as is
Yes.
can we use the weapons that we have in the proper way, the most efficient way, the best way that we should be using those weapons. And so the other factors come into play when it comes to your favorite topic, play calling
Yep. Yep.
and the frequency, right? The timing of the play call. So I don't know, B. I can we dominate this fall? We have every belief that we can. We have every known metric that shows
Yeah.
that we can,
Yep.
but
That's
can we?
right.
Will we?
But will we? Right. And that's the next topic for conversation, right? So let's get into our opinions on that. Um,
Come on.
I think, yeah, all right. All right. So I'm going to take a take here that maybe seems like a cop out, right? If you force me for a yes, I'll tell you right now. If you force me to a yes or no answer right now, my answer is no. But I'm not gonna treat it. I'm not, and it's not to be negative, but I'm not going to treat it that way. I'm going to take this as I can answer this question any way I want. It doesn't have to be a yes or no. So my answer is, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it's possible, but I just don't know because I don't know what some of these coaching changes, right? What some of these potential for maybe opening up. I don't even use the word opening up the playbook for using different play design than what we have previously seen on
Yeah.
both offense and defense, by the way, because I have real defensive concerns as well. We'll get to those. But just speaking offensively right now, I think what it comes down to is we've laid the groundwork, right? The team is capable. But you brought up some great points. The injury bug. How does that affect us? We were able to overcome quite a lot of injuries last year and still play very well down the stretch.
Oh
Pretty
yeah.
remarkable, to be honest with you. Like we were going 2 and 3 deep on the depth chart sometimes for corners at some point, right? Jaquez Bridges had to come over and play corner because he couldn't play safety anymore because we didn't
Yes.
have any healthy corners, right? It was getting rough. It was getting rough
Next
out
man
there.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Super happy to see him get a UFDA deal. By the way, he was a undrafted free agent signing, so that was really nice. Or no, I'm sorry, he got drafted. He got drafted. Excuse me. There was a bunch of
Yes.
UFDAs, but he was drafted next to last pick in the draft. But you know what? I could see him making an impact. That guy can play. So,
Oh yeah.
um, but at any rate, um, the thing that I want to look at, we'll start with the offensive side of the ball, and we can have a discussion about this. But again, you know my thoughts. Prove it to me at this point, right? I need to see it. Now, that would have been my stance no matter what. However, I just wouldn't have had much to any hope that that was going to happen had it not been for some of these offseason developments with Russ. Now, I'm not trying to make too big a deal about Russ. I understand he's still, under Billy's wing. I understand Billy's still calling the plays, right? We know this. That's not up for debate here. However, just hearing some of Russ's comments, I heard something the other day where it said that he might get a little more involved in some of the game planning, right? Even if it's not play calling, game planning. A lot of those pre-planned plays for the first and second drive and the half are scripted, right? So is he more involved in those scripted plays? Those things can matter, right? There's a lot of things where I think Russ could get more involved. I still don't see him doing any play calling. I think Billy's made it abundantly clear that he's going to manage that. That's the way that it is, at least for the foreseeable future, much to my dismay. However, having said all that, if we get some better play design, right? We talked about this a lot. Billy's play calling has its issues, without question. But if we can just get some better play design, at least at times, right? Do something different, do something that we haven't shown 100 times before, right? And make it look a little different out there. Give teams something to think about, put it on film, and they go, whoa, well, what if they throw this at us? Right? Especially as you mentioned, with the talent we have, particularly at running back and wide receiver, because we are deep, very deep, and very talented in both
Oh
of
yeah.
those rooms. And I think we really need to, again, we need to do things to maximize our talent. We talked about this a ton last year, how we were doing a disservice to our team by not maximizing the talent on the field time and time and time again. Some of that will come up in our topic next week when we discuss some stuff about player personnel decisions, but we'll come back to that obviously another time. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, will that look any different from an offensive standpoint? I don't know, but there might be a chance. So you're saying there's a chance, right?
Yeah.
So, and I do feel kind of like that. So you're saying there's a chance, right? It might be a 0.01% chance, but there's a chance, and I can believe in the fact that there's a chance. So give me your thoughts on whether or not we will, and then I want to come back to the defense as well, but I want to let you get in here first.
Yeah. No, I think great points across the board. And that's the thing, right? We have the culture, we have the staff, we have the players, we have the talent. All these things that have been building and bubbling and fuming for all these years. By the way, it's been a long, very long 4 years.
That it has.
And it's like the dam's about to bust, right? Like all these things combined, the dam busts open, it overflows, confetti rains from the heavens, and the Florida Gators are dominant in the SEC and the college football landscape once again.
Yep.
And yet some of the biggest qualms that we've had is execution. Yeah, injuries, you really can't help injuries. But outside of execution, the other thing that we can't help are unforced errors, such as penalties, such as self-inflicted penalties, procedural penalties. I will say, referring back to the spring game, I know it was the spring game, but no unforced errors in the spring game.
Yeah, agreed.
That was more than refreshing to see, right? Because last thing you want to do is go to a spring game and have an over-under bet on, hey, B, how many times do you think it goes over his head?
Yeah, how many procedural penalties?
Yeah. How many times do you think they're moving on the edges, moving on the line? Okay, great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, those things are there. So the other thing now to take into consideration is Billy's done a great job at culture. Billy's done a great job of building up these men. Billy's done a great job of building out this staff. But now we go down to what's in the white lines, and that's the X's and O's. Does Billy let up on some of those things to allow Callaway, to allow Spurrier Jr. to have an influence? Everything points to no, because of where he stands in his process, where he stands in his system. And that is, this is what he's done is what's gotten him here, what got him this job, and what will keep him this job. Well, I'll tell you what, Billy, it is year 4. This is really the Fisher catch bait year, because arguably we've mentioned on paper, this is the best team that we've assembled in a long time.
Yep.
And if we can't make it work by leveraging all of their talent, especially that wide receiver that just came in here, and that is getting paired with a wide receiver who we've seen to show flashes of brilliance coming off offseason hip surgery to no fault of his own. If you don't use those two, and if you don't use that 3-headed monster that we have at running back, I'm sorry, shame on you. Shame on you.
Yeah, not just use them appropriately, maximize them. Not just use them, maximize them. That's the thing, right? Because he's used players before in the past that he should have used. Sometimes not, but a lot of times he's used players he should have used, but he's used them wrong, for lack of a better way to put it. It just has not been the correct utilization of those guys to maximize their talent. And if you didn't catch the receivers Randy was referring to there, that would be the law firm of Wilson and Wilson. So it's Morgan and Morgan for the football field. There you go. A little shout out there. But yeah, we are definitely excited to see what the Wilson brothers can do. And they're not brothers, just saying. But definitely both of them pretty exciting guys. Saw a article this week, believe it was either Sports Illustrated or Athlon, excuse me, that said that there's somebody, I don't know who, but somebody who's got a mock draft with Trey as a first-round pick. So in 2026. So kind of interesting. Should be kind of intriguing to see how that looks and how that goes. But again, yes, provocative, gets the people going.
You know, isn't it odd? No, they're not brothers, but they have the same last name, and they're both from the Tampa Bay area.
It is funny. Yeah, it is funny for sure. Okay. Definitely interesting. All right, so we're both of the same opinion. We don't think that's necessarily going to happen. Maybe it could. It definitely could, but we don't necessarily think it will. Right. However, I do want to touch on the defense here because we've kept most of this about offensive play calling.
Yes.
So I went back and actually listened to some of our stuff from last year, and we were pretty upset with Ron Roberts after Game 3 at Texas A&M, rightfully so. Obviously, we then got things, a little more turned around. Mississippi State wasn't great, but then we definitely improved from there, certainly after that bye week, right? We talked about that. So, what changed? What happened? Well, not as much as you'd think, to be honest. If you go back and you look at the film, we really weren't doing that many things differently after the bye that we were before the bye. But there was better communication, there was better execution of the same kind of things we were doing. So here's my concern on defense, and you already know it because we've had this conversation once upon a time. But my concern on defense is the way Ron Roberts' defense works is it's kind of passive to the short and intermediate game, right? It really doesn't put a lot of pressure on teams when they're trying to do that. It limits explosives for sure. We know that, right? We take the explosives away. We don't have the Armstrong problem, right, that he has where he allows a lot of explosive plays. We don't see that in this defense. That really doesn't happen very often at all. Every once in a while, somebody gets beat and somebody misses an assignment and, we have a problem, but it's rare, right? We're not seeing a ton of that. We also have seen better tackling, which is good to see under Ron Roberts. So these are the positives. But the negatives are this. We allow a lot of short and intermediate passing. We allow a lot of running plays to go for a few more yards than I'd like them to at times, just because of the nature of our scheme and our setup. We're set up in a very, it's not passive, but it's not aggressive in our opening stance. We also don't blitz near as much. We do blitz, but not near as often. And so what it comes down to is this. Our defense last year was as successful as they were because our front four, or maybe five when you got a blitz occasionally, but a lot of times it was the front four, got significant pressure on the quarterback in those last few games, got significant sacks on the quarterback in those last few games, and we also forced a ton of turnovers. Those are things that are like key cornerstones of this system and how it works and to make it work the way that it should is what I'm trying to say. Because otherwise, a team can just nickel and dime you down the field all day long. This defense will allow for that. So if teams kind of figure that out and kind of see that film on there, I'm worried about how we counteract that and what we do. Because if we're not getting those sacks and they are nickel and diming us down the field and they're getting scores because of it, what do we do? It's very much a bend, don't break kind of mentality. But what happens if it starts to break? And not saying that the defense wouldn't still be doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's just the offense executing, at a better level against us. And we're not getting those turnovers and we're not getting those sacks. Then what? And that has me very concerned as well, quite frankly, almost as concerned as the offensive side of the ball, because a big reason we won what we won down the stretch there was because of that defense. Make no mistake about it. So just to talk about some other concerns I have in regards to Will, again, we'll talk about what it means if we did in just a second. But I just wanted to put out the defensive side of the ball there and that take on it, because there are concerns I have there. There are definite concerns. And we'll talk more about those as we get closer to the season. But ultimately, I think there's really a something to be considered there. Now, just because I have concerns about it doesn't mean that it's going to go that way, right? It's not a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination. But at any rate, it's just something to keep an eye on, something to keep in mind, especially if we don't see the defense producing early like we did at the end of the season. It could be something that comes out to rear its head. Hope it doesn't, but it could. Any other thoughts from you on whether or not, I know we already talked about if they will dominate, but any more thoughts on that topic there?
I think the main thing that I have on the defensive side of the football is, I agree with that point as far as, I call it death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Yep.
Nickel and diming, absolutely agree. When you look at dissecting, right, there's a lot of college quarterbacks that still have the ability, or coordinators, to put their quarterbacks in position to just dissect methodically, slowly, work the ball down the field, kind of like what Graham Mertz used to do with a 13-play, 14-play, 79-yard drive. Ring a bell?
Great comparison. Great comparison.
Right. And so when that gets done to us, how do we adjust? Because I think the biggest thing, and anybody can back me up on this, I know you will, is the fact of the communication, the way in which this defense communicated, the way in which the information was streamlined after that first bye week is what made all the difference in the world.
Yep. Right.
The confidence in the execution. Now, the other thing that I'm curious about what's going to happen is Will Harris. I just remember him notoriously for that first day of practice in pads. Will suited up.
Yep.
Will put on pads and said, "Hit me," and the reaction was just like Coach, what are you talking about? Hit you? No, hit me. Like, that's the physical style that they need to play with, and especially when it comes to wrapping the offensive player up, right? To your point, tackling has to be better. Communication has to be better. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Robert Bala.
Yep.
D-line coach, right? It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Vinny Sinceri and what he does, and Darren Wilson and his impact. 3 massive changes. And again, Ron Roberts is the overarching assistant coach and defensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinator, but he also gave up some of that responsibility to the linebackers with Bala, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at that happening and how all those things transpire with the talent that we have, with some of the men that we have that look like, quite frankly, like just grown men. They don't look like 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds, let's be honest, Mackay Bro. And you know, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens on the communication side of the ball and how we adapt in different games. To your point, if we are being picked apart methodically, what's the adaptation to that? How do we evolve from that?
Yep, absolutely.
Big question marks.
Absolutely, it is. And I got a question for you. Of those 3 coaches you just mentioned, who do you think is, I'll rephrase it, who needs to be the most impactful for next season? Not who will be, but who needs to be.
It's got to be Sinceri for me.
I like it. I like
especially
it.
Because
the safety play is probably where we were weakest last year. I like that.
Bingo.
I was going to go with Wilson, but
Bingo.
ultimately our corners, have improved. And I think some of those have already received some of that coaching, not the freshmen, obviously, but, I think some of those guys have, and I'm not saying that Wilson isn't just as good or better than Will Harris, but no. I just think that, to your point, they've already gotten some coaching that's been helpful. I think you might be right on Sinceri, actually. I like that because the safeties were still the glaring weakness on the team last year, for sure. Overall, if you looked at a defensive position that was the weakest, it was the safeties. It just was. And thankfully Castell started finally playing better as the year went on. Obviously, Thornton came on in the back half of the year after getting over that injury, and he looked great. I'm excited that there are starters. And yes, I'm saying I'm excited that Castell is our starter. I am saying that despite the season he had, because he played so well in those last few games. He played really well in the last couple of games, especially the bowl game and the FSU game. He was quite good. So a lot of improvement there, a lot of uptick from where he was early in the season. Now, unfortunately, that also happened last year, and then he regressed to start the year. So let's hope we don't get a repeat of that. But to your point, I like it. I like Sinceri. I think he does need to be the best because we need the most help and the most coaching at that position to really improve what's going on the defensive side of the ball. I like it. It's a good take. Good take.
Well, and furthermore, to that end, couple things. We saw what. And again, the departure of AA, I would have really liked to have some long-term continuity there, but I get it.
Agreed.
What it is. AA, and for those of you, Austin Armstrong, former co-defensive coordinator, referred to Ron Roberts as his football dad. So, if you remember a conversation about that last fall, we wondered how would Ron's influence coming in affect that relationship, affect everything going on. And from everything that we heard, despite what we thought, it was, well, AA runs very complex things, very high-level things, very micro and macro things, or more micro. And Ron kind of simplified it, simplified communications, simplified positions, simplified schemes. Oh, okay. Now, Sinceri played at Alabama, played under Saban, had played under Smart. And so there's a lot of good genes there. How does Sinceri work or coexist with Big Papa Ron? How does that work? And also, to that end, yes, I firmly believe that safety was the biggest area of improvement on this defense. So that's why I feel like Vinny's gonna, I'm not gonna say it's a contract year for him, right? But at the end of the day, I think it will be to see what he looks like as a coach, as a formidable force, as a coordinator, and what he can do to create that continuity for this program on the defensive side of the football moving forward.
I like it. I think it is interesting. I think it's going to be a good thing to watch as the season goes on. And the only indication of this we have are who is starting, how are they playing, how are they performing, what do the rotations look like, right? These are the only things we can see. We're not
Yeah.
at practice, we don't know what's going on, but like we can see it in the play on the film, right? That's why we base everything on film analysis, right? So I think that'll be a very interesting thing to watch as the season goes on, and I think you're right. I think that's really the kicker there. um I also think it's potentially still the most talent depleted room we have on defense. We certainly have young talent coming up. Loving what we're seeing out of Drake Stubbs and Laganza Hayward.
Oh yeah.
However, they're still really young and probably not going to see the field that much. Frankly, I hope they don't see the field that much. Right? I
No, no,
hope
no.
we see
Right.
more of the more veteran guys, because I think that's a presence that we need right now. And those guys have proven that they can play. We just need them to. So, with that, let's move on and let's look at what would it mean or what does it mean if we did dominate this fall. So a
Oh,
last kind of sub question here and talk about, what does it look like if we did? What would it mean? How would that rank out? So again, we kind of made this point earlier, we alluded to it, but we'll really break it down now. So, first and foremost, record. 6-2 is what we talked about, right? So let's talk a little about the schedule here and talk about what 6-2 in the SEC looks like. Let's run through the games. First conference game at LSU. Second conference game, home versus Texas. I don't love either one of those. Third conference game at Texas A&M, at Florida West. Oh God, I called them Texas A&M. Oh, what am I doing?
it's okay. It's okay. No
Yeah,
worries.
I'm reading off a sheet. Sorry, it's Florida West. But at Florida West, no easy task to go to Kyle Field and play the 12th man, right? No question about it. Then we finally get a good one, home versus Mississippi State. Then we have a bye, and then we're at Georgia. Well, Jacksonville, but we're the away team. Not that it matters. Then we go at Kentucky. Then we go at Ole Miss. Then we go home for Tennessee. The schedule is still really hard, as we alluded to, right? These are not easy games that we're talking about here, right? A lot of potential pitfalls and problems out there. And again, it's not. I'm not going to go back to this thing because last year it was look who we got to play. This year I want it to be look who they got to play us, right? That's the way I want it to. That's the way I want it to be. I don't know if it's going to be that way, but that's what I want. That's what I'm rooting for. So I really do think when you look at that schedule, there's not a whole. So you get 2 losses there. That's it. You got to win the other 6.
Ha!
Yeah, that's probably not the easiest thing in the world if we're going to be real about it, right? It's a tough nut to crack to get to 6-2 next year. Maybe being 5-3 and getting that bye would be a good thing, but I'm not going to call for that. We're going to call for 6-2. So if this were to happen, where does that go by if we look at the schedule? Okay, well, I mean, yes, we beat LSU this year. No, I don't think they're going to be particularly better next year than they were this year. Not yet, anyway. I think some of the young talent they have coming in is going to make them better, but I don't think they're there yet. I don't think we see a huge improvement. I think that's a game we can win, but it's Death Valley. It's likely at night. Ugh, tough one. That could easily be a loss, right? But I think you have to call for it being a win. Home versus Texas, man, love to get it, but again, I'm not going to call for wins against Texas and Georgia until we prove we can do it. So that's got to be one of my L's. At Texas A&M, again, tough game. I think we have to get that one to be 6-2, but like this is what it takes, right? So if you break it all down, I think we need wins at LSU, at Texas A&M, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss. That's a lot of away games. Home versus Mississippi State and home versus Tennessee. I think that's where you have to get your 6. I mean, maybe there's a way you beat Texas or Georgia and you can miss one of those other ones. It's possible. It's at least in the realm of possibility this year. I don't think it happens, but maybe. Maybe we could have very well beat Georgia last year. So maybe that one's in play, right? Maybe everything's on the table. I don't know. We'll see. But ultimately, that's a tough 8 games to get 6 out of. So it's no small task when you look at it. However, here is your upside, as we mentioned. When you go back and you look at what we did in those last few games, and we talked about this at the very beginning when we talked about where we need to rank, that 33 points a game, that we were at for those 3 starts where Lagway was the starter and finished the game in SEC play, 33 points per game, it would put us 29th nationally for the season. That's for everything. not just counting SEC games. That's for every game. If we would have been top 30, we said we needed to be top 40. We would have been top 30 on offense. Defensively at 17.67, we would have been 11th national.
Oh, baby.
11th. We said we needed to be top 30. We'd be top 15. That's something. Almost top 10 in that scenario. Now, I'm not saying we do that every game. That's not likely, nor is it realistic. However, if we can put together 6 games with those stats, good luck winning, as in the other team.
Bingo.
So this is why it's possible. This is why it can happen. But will continues to be another question, as we mentioned. So this is what it would look like if we were going to do it, right? We would need to be somewhere in that range on both of those numbers. Quite frankly, it would need to be close. Maybe we could give up a few more points per game. We probably don't have to be quite that high, but the 33 points per game is probably about right, quite frankly, to beat some of these teams, right? And we're going to need to be good defensively too. So I think that's what it looks like to go 6-2. Is averaging in SEC play something in the 33-point range, averaging something, and I'll give us up to 20-point range defensively. But we need to have close to, if we looked at the margin, we looked at this on some of these teams, if we look at the margin of scoring between offensive production and defensive points allowed, it was something in the neighborhood of about 2 scores. So if we were 33-20, that's probably good enough to get it done. But it would have to be something like that for all the SEC games, which, again, no small task, obviously, when you look at that schedule. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially going back to the topic of talent being spread out and the SEC being the SEC in the top 25. I mean, look at you talk about gauntlet. I remember referring to last year's schedule as a gauntlet, and it was. So what do we refer to this year's schedule as?
I don't know.
But that's the thing, right? When you look at the teams,
hang on, put a pin in that. I'll get back to you.
fair. But that's the thing. I mean, look at when we played LSU, when we played Ole Miss back to back. Those 2 teams, besides being ranked, were also 2 top 5 offensive teams, not just in the SEC, in the nation.
The country. That's right, in the nation.
Right.
And Kentucky was a top 10 defensive team in the nation when we played them.
They absolutely correct. And so you look at those things and you're like, well, how does that translate? And that's what's very important about the point you made regarding the defense. And if the defense plays the way they played, especially to round out that final 5, oh my gosh, it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why I made that point earlier about the defenses. I do not have some like supreme faith that we are going to come back and be that defense again. Listen, could we be? Yeah, sure, we could be. But again, the things that it's predicated on are a little shaky, right? It's hard to base your defense on sacks and turnovers. That's hard. That's hard because there are games where you're just not going to get them. They exist. And you have to keep getting them consistently, at least some in each game, in order to make this defense effective. And it just worries me a little bit. Now, maybe things will mix up. Maybe we'll see some different things scheme-wise. I don't think we will, but maybe we will. And maybe the fact that they have this communication, like you mentioned, maybe that makes all the difference. Maybe that's what caused those things to happen. I don't know. I'm not on the field, right? All I can do is watch the film and tell you it got a hell of a lot better, right?
Sure.
That's it.
But then also, what's the buzz that we've been hearing about what the defense has been doing this spring compared to the offense? Is the offense not functioning as well because of DJ sitting out, not taking the first rep snaps? Right.
And I think that probably has a lot to do with it. However, for those that are not aware, the spring camp intel before the spring game was that the defense had been outplaying the offense fairly substantially in most of the spring practices. That's been the intel that's coming out of camp. I'll give Delatore a little shout out there. He's the one who dropped that bit of knowledge out there, and I think that is definitely something that's interesting because if you watch the spring game, you might not have thought that, right? But remember, spring games are not necessarily. I mentioned I didn't think I saw Ernest Graham go full a couple of times, right? Those things can be a little, hey, let the offense have some points type of thing, right? I definitely think that that can be a factor. And when you hear what we're hearing about how the defense has been playing, it's encouraging, for sure. It's encouraging. And we have the talent. So again, there's a lot of things that point to maybe we can. Actually, again, we know we can. I
Yes,
gotta keep saying that. Maybe we will.
maybe we
Maybe.
will.
But it's
Okay,
for me, it's still a pretty loose maybe, but we'll see.
and that's fair. And but here's the thing, for the whole 33 points per game, because last year we were at what 28.2.
I believe that's correct.
To get up to top 30 nationally in points per game, especially when you look at the top team in the nation at 38. Okay, phenomenal offensive numbers. And then a defensive points per game at 17.67 puts us to number 11 nationally, a spot that we have not been in quite some time, maybe finding that
Quite
low.
some time. Might be Muschamp days.
Maybe Coach Boom, right? But that's the other
Yep.
thing too. Even if we don't hit the top 30 or top 40 and top 30 respectively, to your point, if we're within 10 position points off of that or 10 places off of that, that is a very formidable team. So now I'm going to ask you a different question.
All right.
Let's say this happens and we are in the hunt for the CFP, and it's a great season. It's a 9-3 season. It's a 10-2 season. Again, not to put the cart before the horse.
Yep.
Ben, what does this tell us, if anything, about Billy Napier? And the reason I'll preface it that way is because there's an article that I saw a couple days ago that I sent to you. You know what I'm talking about. Can Billy Napier be a potential quarterback whisperer? So I'll just leave it at that. What can this tell us, if anything, about Billy Napier if all of these things come together this fall?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what it would tell you is that he's, in theory anyway, and again, I can't know this for sure, but in theory, his plan is coming together the way he wanted it to. It's just taken a lot longer than anybody wanted it to on our side, right? But I think 10-2 certainly, maybe even 9-3. Um, which again, I think either one of those is a fantastic season when you look at the schedule, right? That's a really good year. Because we also have at Miami in there. And
Yes.
Carson Beck left, but we still got to play him, right? And then we have at what's the other non-conference that's we have FSU at home, which probably
Yeah.
won't be much, but you never know. They could bounce back next year, right? So that's the other game you have to keep an eye on. Obviously, it's
Well,
rivalry game. You never
they have a
know.
new offensive coordinator, so there's that.
Yeah, yeah, they do. Oh, that's hilarious that they have a new offensive coordinator. For those that don't know, it's Gus Malzahn, and yeah, I don't see that working at all. But we'll just leave that alone.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a train wreck. But we'll move along. Um, so what are we? What does it say about Billy? I think it says that Billy's plan, his long-term vision, if you will, is coming together. Or at least it has the potential to. I mean, I still think you have to see what do those games look like. Do we win a bunch of like 2-point wins at the last moment, time and time again, right? Or were we, like you said earlier, dominant in some of these victories, as I think we would need to be to really show that this team is showing significant growth and can really do something come the postseason. I think overall it still probably obviously looks good for Billy. Um, I still don't know that I think he's the solution. I'm going to stick with that. He's shown me too many things that are not right for me to think that he is the right solution here. However, it doesn't mean that he can't still put something together. I will not rule that out as a possibility, right? Like I already talked about. I don't think he's the right fit ultimately. I still stand by my guns. I haven't changed my stance since I called for him to be gone
Yeah.
after game 3 of last year, game 4 of last year, something like that. It to me, it just doesn't make sense the way he does certain things, and we'll get into some of those discussions about player personnel next week, right? When we talk about that, or 2 weeks from now, excuse me. But ultimately, I still don't know if he's the right fit, no matter what happens this year. I really don't. Now, listen. The one thing aside from that is if he somehow pulls it through and we go to the national championship game, right? We don't have to win it. If we get there, I will say, you know what? He proved me wrong. It just took more time than I was ready for, but I don't see that happening. I think that's highly unlikely, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. What's your answer to that question? What does it mean for Billy if we do that?
Along the similar lines of your response. So first is it took longer than we anticipated, but at the end of the day, nowadays we're just in a microwave society, or microwave or air fryer, whatever you want to call it, society, that we expect to win now, we expect to win immediately. And maybe expect is the wrong word, but I think I'm using it properly there, because the money, the time, the resources involved, that's the thing, right? When you spend the kind of money you spend on coach, I mean, look at some of the other schools and some of the buyouts for some of those coaches at those other schools.
Yeah.
Right. When you look at a Franklin up there in Penn State, and a Ryan Day, and Ryan Day, shut a lot of people up this past
He
year.
did.
Right. Regardless,
now you just got to figure out how to beat Michigan.
There's the catch, right? Beating Michigan. Does Chip Kelly stay on staff? All those things, right? Will Howard's gone. Who's next and up and coming? But either way, regardless of that, Billy's had such a mockery made out of his program when it comes to the infamous picture about the staff outnumbering the players, the on-field decisions, the 2-minute drill that was non-existent, and that's that has reared its ugly head every now and again. Countless procedural penalties and the improper use of the play clock, the game clock.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. If we can really, if this team can really do what it needs to do, and kind of like what they did the last 5 games of last season, rally around DJ at 70% or whatever he was with the hamstring, to have that next man up mentality, to have all of these things go right and go well, and to have faith and hope and belief be powerful things to drive each player, as he mentioned after I believe the Ole Miss game.
Yep.
Then all it tells us is that he might not have been the right guy for the job, but it might have been what this program needed in lieu of where it was.
Yeah.
But also to forge a proper path forward to where it needs to go to return to that overall, not just SEC dominance, but national dominance.
I like it. It's a nice take.
So I'll just wrap up with that.
No, I like it. I think that's a good kind of segue here to close things out. And it is interesting. It would be an interesting run if we did manage to, pull off the 06 heroics, right, of basketball and football at the same time. I don't see that happening, but it would be interesting. We do tend to run those things in parity a little bit from where we've seen in the past. So it'd be interesting to see. Again, for those that don't know, only school that has now won 3 men's basketball and football national championships. There's nobody else that's done it. So pretty cool deal there. So with that, I think we will wrap this thing up. Really good discussion here. I really liked kind of getting into this and talking about what it looks like for next season. Again, we don't know, we can't know, but we can look at the stats, we can look at the data, and we can try to make the best assessment we can possible. That's what we always try to do, right? And I think that we've been able to do that pretty effectively in this. So, it's interesting to see where we go. We'll see if it materializes. Again, it has the chance. Don't know if it will, though. So with that, we'll close things out here. Our next podcast will be on May 13th, Tuesday, I believe, May 13th. And we will go through process, evaluation, and player personnel decisions. So kind of some of our crux of our vision statement there. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how that looked last year a little more. We already kind of talked about this a little, but we're going to discuss last year's player personnel choices, where we started, where we ended. Obviously some of that forced by injury, but nonetheless, just interesting. And then we're going to talk about what we kind of want to see this year in terms of the players that we think, maybe should be on the field based on what we've seen so far. And certainly, obviously, that'll be reevaluated once we have some fall camp intel as well. But ultimately, that's the topic. Looking forward to that one as well. Be really interested to kind of get in and break that down as far as that stuff goes. But with that, I'll turn it over to you. And you got any closing thoughts here?
No, that's it, man. Great discussion, great topic, especially when you look at that D word, dominance.
Yes.
And just the era of talking about it with regards to this program and where it has been. One can argue it's been in the desert for a while.
Indeed. No, again, the fact that we can even discuss it, that we can even discuss it is great.
Exactly. And the fact that we have a potential Heisman candidate at quarterback, the fact that we have a lot of scar tissue and we've been able to fill up a roster that can rival a lot of other schools out there for the first time in a long time. Things are palpable, and hey, they can be very provocative this fall. Let's just put it that way. All right. And so
Indeed.
I'll wrap this up, man. But anyways, wherever you are, whenever you may be listening, thank you for taking the time, and we will see you around, Gator Nation.